who joins me in the studio. Emmanuel, what are the expectations for this donor conference that is being hosted by Germany here for Moldova? Is it just money?
It's money and support. I think Moldova has been under increased pressure this month, not only because it is home to so many refugees with regards to its population, but also because it's one of the poorest countries on the European continent. So money, of course, is the major concern. And maybe if we saw on a map also where Moldova is located, it is right next to war-torn Ukraine. It is right next to Romania as well. So it is, it is a door to the European Union, which explains why so many people are coming. And Christina was mentioning earlier, 400,000 refugees are now in, and they need support. The country needs support for that. So there's that extra loan that has been announced by Germany of 50 million euros. That's roughly $55 million that will come. This is a loan. It comes on top of a support package of 40 million euros, and it is to help the country cope with that situation. With that money, it will be also to develop social infrastructure, to develop schools, kindergartens, accommodation in municipalities where refugees have arrived, which is overall in the country. And it will also help towards the integration of refugees. And another very important point of that conference is to help to support Moldova, help it reduce its dependence on Russian energy. It's almost 100% dependent on Russian gas.
Let's talk about what else Berlin can offer at the moment. There's a lot of talk about sanctions, and we heard Barbara earlier that now the sanctions against Russian oil and coal are being discussed. What can you tell us about that?
Well, this has just come in. Germany said it would support an embargo on Russian coal if that is done as a phase-out, with a phase-out. And the Finance Minister, Christian Lindner, also said that Germany was open to tighten further the sanctions against Russia. So I think Germany was criticized for refusing an embargo on Russian gas because Germany itself is importing 50% of its gas from Russia. But the situation is very volatile. We've seen Germany evolve in a way we've never seen it doing it before. For example, with weapons. It's against Germany's usual policy to send weapons, at least officially, to another country. And yet, over the past months, we've seen Germany pledging to send weapons to Ukraine. It has formally said it couldn't do without Russian gas. And since the Russian invasion in Ukraine, we've seen this position evolve as well, with Robert Habeck, the Minister of Economy, traveling to other countries to strike deals to try and make Germany independent from Russian gas. And just yesterday, on Monday, we saw Germany putting Gazprom Germania under the control of regulators. So it really does try. It falls short of agreeing to an embargo on Russian gas, but it does try to become independent from Russian gas.
Just to inform our viewers who might have just joined us, we're waiting for a joint press conference of the German, French and Romanian foreign ministers, plus the Moldovan prime minister, or president, I should say, to start here in Berlin. There was a donor conference today hosted here by Annalena Baerbock, the German foreign minister, and we go live to that as soon as it happens. You're seeing live pictures of the venue here right now. You mentioned the measures that Germany has taken. Germany having been quite reluctant, especially when it comes to an embargo on Russian gas. Germany has been criticized pretty harshly, and the criticism hasn't stopped. Do you think that's deserved?
I think Germany is doing what it can to become independent from Russian gas. It has shown a willingness to to gain this independence, but of course it's not going fast enough. If you look at that situation from the Ukrainian perspective, you also have to know that even if Germany is importing 50% of its gas right now from Russia, the reserves in Germany are still 20% full. That means that even if the Russian gas stopped flowing like right now, it would still not constitute an issue for the situation right now. It will be for later. So Germany does try. We see this is a very volatile situation. It might still agree to an embargo. We do not know about that as of yet. In any case, it tries to answer to the criticism.
So Gazprom, as you've mentioned earlier, has been put, the German arm of Gazprom, the Russian gas company, has been put under administration, if you will, by the German regulator. How big of a move is that diplomatically?
Well, it's important, and Vice Chancellor and Economy Minister Robert Habeck said it was a necessary step to avoid Germany being exposed to arbitrary decisions by the Kremlin and to ensure the security of Germany's gas supplies. And why is that? It's because Gazprom Germany owns companies that deal with the trade, the storage and the transport of Russian gas. So if there is a regulator, then Germany can secure its access to its gas supplies. Now, of course, this is also, this is also criticized. Yesterday, I was in front of the Brandenburger Tor. There was a protest by Ukrainian refugees who were saying that if you use Russian gas, then you have Ukrainian blood on your hands. So not everyone understands why Germany just simply doesn't stop using Russian gas. The way Lithuania, who was heavily dependent a few years ago, up until a few years ago, on Russian gas, just decided to, disenfranchise itself from those supplies.
Emmanuel Chaz, so far, thank you very much. We're still waiting for the press conference to start after the donor conference for Moldova by the foreign ministers of Germany, France and Romania and the Prime Minister of Moldova. And we go to that as soon as it starts. Meanwhile, here's a quick look at some of the other news making headlines today. Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock says Berlin is expelling 40 Russian diplomats after civilians were discovered dead in the Ukrainian town of Bucha. France and Lithuania have announced similar moves. Germany will also boost support for Ukraine's armed forces and tighten economic sanctions against Moscow. Authorities in Hungary say 5 people have died after a passenger train collided with a pickup truck and derailed. Transport authorities say the driver of the vehicle ran a red light. More than 10 people were also injured in the crash, which happened southeast of the capital, Budapest. And we're going to France now, where polls are pointing to a likely win for President Emmanuel Macron in the presidential elections that begin on Sunday. Macron saw a boost to his ratings at the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. He positioned himself as a strong leader during a time of war who continued a dialogue with President Putin. But those approval ratings have slipped, and his position now seems increasingly under threat from both the far right and far left candidates. Immigration has been one of the main issues in this election. DW's Lisa Louis spoke to a priest in the French city of Lyon who has spent decades campaigning for migrants' rights.
Christian Delorme has been on the front lines of campaigns for migrants' rights for nearly 50 years. Back in 1983, he was part of France's very first demonstration for their rights. 17 people marched for 7 weeks against xenophobia, from Marseille in the south to Paris, where they were joined by 100,000 others.
During that time, many young of foreign descent were killed by neighbours, or even the police, because they'd say stolen cars. The march was a way of saying, stop shooting at us. But these youngsters, who were born to immigrants and had French nationality, also believed they'd get equal rights in a republic that they saw as fraternal, open-minded and egalitarian.
But that belief has been eroded over the past decades. Watching some of the presidential candidates, Delorme can see why.
The source of crime in our country is the immigration we've seen over the past 30 years. Without immigration, criminal activity will go down. The fear of foreigners, the rejection of them, a closure of borders and the expulsion of foreigners is not only a central topic of the election campaigns of the two far-right candidates, that theme is also being picked up by other presidential candidates. It's a disaster.
Delorme hosts several migrants at his parish. They too have been watching the election campaign with dismay and increasingly fear.
We're afraid of certain candidates because they're attacking us. They want to stoke fear to win over votes. But that's deeply shocking. We're no criminals. I saw many people die on my way to France. They drowned. They were shot at. They perished. Often I think of that and can't sleep at night. Of course, they can say what they want during the election campaign. But we're worried how things will turn out afterwards.
As he takes us to one of the places in Lyon he walked through back in 1983, Delorme says he has faith people will rediscover their humanity, perhaps with a little help from pragmatic considerations.
When I look at what's happening today in Ukraine, it's a tragedy. I see that most people spontaneously want to help. Plus, it's in our own interest to take in more migrants. We have a demographic deficit and need more young people.
He hopes that whoever wins the election will also rediscover a feeling of solidarity and turn France into a more welcoming place.
Now, the war in Ukraine has pushed the EU to take steps to reduce its dependence on Russian gas and move towards cleaner energy. But UN climate scientists say climate action is not happening fast enough. They have released the most comprehensive report ever produced on how to stop global warming, and its findings are dire.
The world is hurtling towards a climate danger zone, and the options to avoid it are running out. The assessment of the new IPCC report is clear. Drastic action is needed to avert catastrophic global warming. The UN Secretary-General said the report revealed a litany of broken climate promises.
Some government and business leaders are saying one thing but doing another. Simply put, they are lying. And the results will be catastrophic. This is a climate emergency. Climate scientists warn that we are already perilously close to tipping points that could lead to cascading and irreversible climate impacts.
Climate impact that is leading to more extreme weather events. The world is on a pathway to exceed the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming limit agreed at COP21 in Paris.
If we continue acting as we are now, we're not even going to limit warming to 2 degrees, never mind 1.5 degrees. Emissions in the last decade were the highest they've ever been and have continued to increase.
Scientists say emissions must peak by 2025 to prevent disastrous climate effects, and that only a drastic reduction will secure a livable future.
The big message we've got, human activities got us into this problem, and human agency can actually get us out of it again. And I think that's the hopeful message that we're trying to get over in this report. It's not all lost. We really have the chance to do something.
The world must leave behind the age of fossil fuels, the UN says, or face the disastrous consequences of climate change.
And just a reminder for viewers who've just joined us, we are waiting for the joint press conference of the Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock with Prime Minister of Moldova, Natalia Gavrilița, the Foreign Minister of France, Jean-Yves Le Drian, and Foreign Minister of Romania, Bogdan Oreskelets. And that is due to start any moment now. We're seeing live pictures here of the podiums being prepared for those politicians after their donor conference for more support for the tiny country of Moldova that has taken in the most refugees per capita in this current crisis in Ukraine. And with me in the studio is Emmanuel Schaz, our political correspondent. Emmanuel, we've been talking earlier about the measures that many countries and also Germany has taken in support of Ukraine. There was another step today, and that was an expulsion of diplomats, and quite a significant one, wasn't it?
Quite a significant move from Germany. It follows suit. Other countries, EU countries, have done so, and 40 Russian envoys have been expelled. That means they have 5 days to leave German territory, and Foreign Minister Baerbock justifies this decision by saying that these people, those Russian envoys, have worked, I quote, against our freedom, against the cohesion of our society, and of the quote. So this is really, she also said that the sanctions would be further tightened, and that's a first step, if you will, after the horrible pictures of Bucha have emerged. Chancellor Olaf Scholz had said that Germany would impose further sanctions, also on a bilateral level. That's the first measure, and of course putting Gazprom, as we were talking just earlier, putting the German company, German side of the Gazprom company under the supervision of regulators was another strong move by Germany.
So do you think that from the outside, the pressure on Germany, of course, is growing? These are small gestures compared to what is going on in Ukraine, and many are asking Germany to sort of step up to the plate, bring in all their economic weight if they can. Do you think that is enough so that that Germany's friends in the West, and also crucially Ukraine, say, well, yes, they are doing something at least?
Well, I think Germany is doing something very German, meaning they implement those measures gradually, and they always seek to justify every move and to answer, to keep also some sanctions should the situation escalate further. Of course, one could ask oneself, how further can it escalate after having seen the pictures of Bucha, for example? But Baerbock, also the foreign minister, also said that Germany would send more weapons, and we have to keep in mind that this changes decades of foreign policy by Germany, which had never officially sent those weapons to war-torn countries. So the fact that Germany has, switched positions, has done this U-turn already, this is a big step for Germany, even if from the outside it might look like a small one. Remember, end of January, Germany had only pledged for 5,000 helmets to support Ukraine, and now it has increased by pledging to send, missiles, anti-tank missiles, anti-tank weapons. I think around 3,000 anti-tank missiles for Ukraine, and it has announced it would send even more. So we might be surprised by what is more to come in terms of sanctions by Germany. It has definitely stepped up. It has definitely trying to get up to speed and to answer the criticism it faces for its handling of the situation.
You mentioned how Germany's initial reluctance to help with weapons, with proper guns and not just helmets, has changed, and it actually was a sea change in German foreign policy. Do you think, with these fresh pictures that are emerging from Bucha, these horrible accounts of rape and torture of civilians, will that sort of add to the pressure that is already there?
It definitely does. I think everybody was appalled by those pictures, including governments, and the pressure is added not only by Ukraine, which obviously desperately needs help and wants help of its Western allies, but also from, the general public. Like, everybody has access to those pictures if they so wish. So there's added pressure on any government, but also on the German government for it to act swiftly. Those pictures emerged over the weekend, and we saw the first further sanctions being implemented on Monday. So the government is reacting. Is that enough? You know, the next few days will tell, but it is definitely reacting.
So you mentioned the sanctions. Now, one of these sanctions would, of course, be cutting off the gas supplies. But before we talk about gas, I just want to remind viewers that we are currently waiting for a joint press conference to start after a donor conference that was hosted by Germany here in Berlin today. We're waiting for German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock and the Prime Minister of Moldova, Natalia Gavrili. Also the Foreign Minister of France, Jean-Yves Le Drian, and Foreign Minister of Romania, Bogdan Aurescu, are part of that lineup. So as soon as that starts, we go there live. But let's talk about gas, this big issue. Emmanuel Schas still in the studio here with me, our political correspondent. What could Germany do? I mean, there's lots of pressure to cut off the Russian gas, but Germany says we can't. I mean, should they do it, what would happen in Germany?
Well, there would be an increase in prices, that's for sure, that would come, but it might not amount to, you know, the catastrophe that some necessarily fear. You know, Germany's gas reserves are still full by a quarter. There's 25% of gas in those reserves. So even if it cut off the gas flow right now, it would still be able to live on those reserves for the next weeks, the next months to come. It might also accelerate the switch to cleaner energy, which was also a goal of this current government. Germany does try to become more independent from Russian gas. Perhaps it should inspire itself from Lithuania, who announced that it was now completely independent from Russian gas. Lithuania was heavily dependent of the Russian gas supplies as early as 2015. It took 7 years, and with no pressure of a war just next door. So Germany should be able to do it a bit quicker and definitely under those pressing circumstances.
Emmanuel, thank you so far. We're going to talk a bit more a little later. Let's remind ourselves why we're waiting for the results of that donor conference for more help for Moldova, because Moldova is appealing for help in coping with the flow of refugees from Ukraine. Some 100,000 people have fled to the small country, which is one of Europe's poorest. Germany says it will extend a no-strings-attached €50 million loan to help the country. The German government is hosting this donor conference to raise more money for Moldova, a former Soviet republic that sits on Ukraine's southwestern border. And we'll be crossing live to that press conference in Berlin, where the Moldovan president will be joined, Prime Minister rather, will be joined by the German, French and Romanian foreign ministers. But first, let's have a look at this report filed by our correspondent Christine Mundwa from the Moldovan city of Orhei.
It's humble homes like these in this village in Orhei, whose doors have opened to Ukrainians fleeing the war in their country. This is Mariana's house. 10 people live here now, sharing the little her family has.
I earn a small salary.
And we have to get out of this report because the press conference of the foreign ministers and the Moldovan Prime Minister is starting right now. Let's have a listen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Prime Minister Natalia Gavrili, dear colleague and friend Jean-Yves Le Drian, dear Bogdan Aurescu, a warm welcome, and thank you very much for having launched the Solidarity Platform for Moldova. We're meeting in the 6th week of a criminal war of aggression in Europe. It's week number 6 of death and destruction in our immediate neighborhood. We see millions of people losing their home, their friends, their family, and we're meeting here 6 weeks after what had been unimaginable had become reality, and now, and that is what Russia wants, it's turning into a horrible and torturous reality. We must not accept that these inhumane images from Bucha and Mariupol and from so many other locations in cities and towns become normality ever. We will and we have to fight against war crimes becoming normal. We're countering the idea becoming normality, which is meant to justify this barbarism, the allegation that Russia has any claim based on history to negate nations in their neighborhood the right to their own self-determined life, to their existence of their state. This conference, which takes place today, sends out a very clear message. No country is subject to the arbitrary wills of others. Nobody is the backyard of somebody else. Nobody is condemned to live in the lack of freedom only because the Russian government wants to achieve that in their nationalist craze. Dear Prime Minister, 30 states and 9 international organizations have gathered here today in order to recognize and appreciate the performance of Moldova. Moldova, a country with 2.5 million inhabitants, who have taken in hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian refugees, providing them with accommodation and shelter from the war. And such an achievement was also continued upon by sticking to the reform agenda of Moldova, by embarking upon our joint European path and to assert our European values against this war of aggression by Russia. We met here today to give that very clear message that Moldova wouldn't stand alone. We see the challenges that you are confronting. We have your back, and we are working preventatively together with our partners. We're going to strengthen Moldova in 5 core areas, and we are going to provide support. We are supporting Moldova when it comes to providing help for those fleeing from Ukraine. This includes, of course, also the continuation of the distribution flights, particularly for those persons who are in special needs of support. We have agreed on the swift acceptance of 12,000 people, but this distribution of refugees just started with today. Alongside this, we're going to provide humanitarian aid to the tune of 71 million euro. As of today. Secondly, we're going to support Moldova in the field of power generation, where they have had large vulnerabilities so far. Thirdly, we're going to support the Moldova government when it comes to implementing their reform agenda in the fields of justice, the corruption, the fight against corruption, and in the fields of economic development. Fourth, we're going to support Moldova when it comes to border management. Fifth, we're going to support the resilience and strengthen the resilience of Moldova also in financial terms. We're going to provide loans, budgetary support, and other financial support to the tune of 196 million euros. Federal Chancellor today announced a loan without any strings attached to the tune of 50 million euros to Moldova. And we're facing a bitter reality in doing all this. Everything indicates that we are only at the very beginning of this crisis, of this horrible war. And everything indicates that we need perseverance. And this is why this press conference is not the conclusion and closure of our joint work. It's just the kick-off meeting for a long-term continuous support platform for Moldova. Later in the afternoon, the 5 working groups are going to start with their work in order to support Moldova in their respective fields in the long run. For the decision to support this platform, I want to thank the co-hosts, France and Romania, and want to thank all other friends and partners who have taken on responsibility in order to implement today's decisions. Dear Prime Minister, I can assure you that we not only need perseverance, but indeed we do have perseverance and stamina together. At the end of the day, it's not only about Moldova or Ukraine. It's about Europe. It is about our joint and shared freedom, the freedom to live the way we want, self-determination, peace and security, and to make sure that our children will also have the opportunity to live in this way. Thank you very much.
Oui, mesdames et messieurs, quelques mots simplement pour me réjouir d'être présent à cette conférence de soutien à la Moldavie.
I'm very happy for this aid conference to support Moldova in a very difficult context, as Annalena Baerbock has already alluded to. And fact of the matter is that we're dealing with a war which is waging on independently of the narrative that Russia tries to promulgate. The war is going on. The logics of invasion is going to be continued, although the narratives might change. The negotiations can't and do not develop and seem to be stalled. Not much has changed ever since the war was unleashed. And not only this, we're seeing an increase of atrocities and acts of barbarism perpetrated by Russian troops in the occupied villages and sites in Ukraine, and that's where we are seeing the extent of the disaster and the drama unfolding in front of our eyes. Ms. Baerbock and myself stay in constant contact, and we're going to meet again tomorrow in Brussels for the Foreign Ministers meeting, a NATO meeting. The Europeans are going to meet for a European Council of Foreign Ministers, but the deterioration of the situation makes me state at the very beginning of the press conference on Moldova, makes me state that together with our German friends, we are going to continue our support for Ukraine in humanitarian terms, financial terms, military terms. We provide goods, and we work in close alignment with Romania. And together, we're going to see the need to impose more sanctions in view of the increasing severity of the situation and in view of the horror that these pictures cause in us, the dismay they cause in us. We need to launch a fifth package of sanctions with a view to the meeting to take place on the 11th of April. Germany and France are about to define the details of such package, and oil and coal need to be part of that packages. The modalities and details are about to be deliberated upon right now. We also need to work to prevent an impunity of these crimes that we've been witnessing. Impunity of seeming war crimes and crimes against humanity, and we need to support Ukraine to document these crimes, and this is what we're going to do. Regardless of this, together with Mr. Bogdan Orescu, we made efforts to put together this aid conference for Moldova, where the conclusions have already been portrayed and laid out by Ms. Baerbock. What I believe is very important to highlight is the generosity for Ukrainian refugees, which has been evidenced various times, also by the Prime Minister, Ms. Gavrilytsa, and we see the support for Moldova by all stakeholders who met here today. It's not enough to provide one-off support. It's going to be a long war, it's a long crisis, and this links up to the reform efforts that are underway in Moldova, which you are already carrying out, Prime Minister Gavrilitsa, and which you are going to continue. And I also like to draw your attention at this juncture to the support of refugees and the provision of help to refugees. Foreign Minister Baerbock already hinted to this, and we also want to help Moldova to achieve energy independence. We're going to go further into detail later in the afternoon in order to develop a robust cooperation and partnership so that Moldova can see its sovereignty guaranteed without having to rely on energy sources from outside which they cannot control. So, in conclusion, it's about solidarity. It's about a well-understood self-interest in security, because the security of Moldova is the security of
Dear Minister Baerbock, dear
Europe.
Marlina, for organizing this very timely conference as we meet here in Berlin for this landmark event. Indeed, this is against the background of the aggravation of the security situation in Ukraine, and also against the background of what we have discovered in terms of war crimes in this country. And I would like to reiterate the fact that it is absolutely clear that Russia is responsible for these crimes committed in an area of Ukraine which was under its occupation when these crimes were committed. Indeed, all perpetrators must be brought to justice, and I renew the appeal that I made yesterday for the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to send immediately a team of investigators on the ground in order to collect evidence, in order for the investigation to be based on very solid proof. And Romania continues to work side by side with its partners, with France, with Germany, and all other partners within the European Union in order to increase the pressure on Russia in order to stop this illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. It is imperative, especially against the background of what we have seen in the past days, the massacre in Bucha and other towns of Ukraine, that this illegal aggression stop immediately. And at the same time, we gather here in Berlin for this very important conference because the war in Ukraine, which was illegally started by Russia, produces consequences also beyond the borders of Ukraine. And these consequences are also, creating difficulties to countries like the Republic of Moldova, which is the most affected direct neighbor of Ukraine. I am deeply honored to co-chair today this conference together with my German and French colleagues and friends. And I'm very glad that we are able to launch this Moldova support platform and to mobilize important international assistance for the Republic of Moldova. My firm belief is that through this conference and the launching of the Moldova support platform, we managed to send a powerful message of firm support for and engagement with the authorities in Chisinau. This conference is not just a one-off event. We are here for the long haul to assist and work with our Moldovan friends. And that is why the initiative launched today here in Berlin will help address both pressing challenges, but also medium and long-term development needs for the Republic of Moldova. As we all know, the Republic of Moldova was and is confronted with several overlapping crises and challenges, and with a financing gap that threaten the government's ability to implement the reforms it has committed to. That is why Chisinau needs our immediate and decisive support. And that's why we are here today united and determined to move to another stage, the assistance for the Republic of Moldova. I welcomed during the conference the EU and international support that was swift and consistent so far, but more needs to be done, including by relocating refugees from the Republic of Moldova. Let me brief you on the main points I have shared with my colleagues during the conference. First, I have informed about the support that Romania is providing bilaterally to the Republic of Moldova, more precisely a support package of grants that comprises 100 million euro for development projects, which we will soon start to implement. It was agreed recently during the Romania-Republic of Moldova joint government meeting in Chisinau in February. Second, substantial in-kind humanitarian assistance, more than 72 tons for the refugees that found shelter on the territory of the Republic of Moldova. Donation of large quantities of fuel and tar, worth of 3.8 million euro. A step that we have, of course, coordinated with our Moldovan colleagues, and it is meant to strengthen the Republic of Moldova's energy security in a complicated context. And at the same time, I have announced today that Romania decided to grant fresh money to support the budget of the Republic of Moldova at these critical times, more precisely an additional grant of 10 million euro. Second, I shared Romania's vision on certain key priorities. We need to focus on the longer term in support of the Republic of Moldova, more precisely a robust financial assistance, which is essential to help the authorities cope with the energy crisis, to stabilize public finances, and very importantly, support the objective of implementing reforms, strengthen the rule of law, modernize public institutions, sustain the standard of living. Then on energy security, I stressed that we should look at developing local energy generating capacities to strengthening electricity interconnections, as well as gas connectivity inside the Republic of Moldova, and to support gas supply diversification. I also reiterated the proposal for a support group for the Republic of Moldova to be created within the European Commission to help better coordinate and articulate EU and EU member states' assistance for the Republic of Moldova. And third, I have reiterated Romania's firm support for a clear recognition of the Republic of Moldova's European perspective, not just because of the current exceptional circumstances, but because of the clear, genuine commitment of the government in Chisinau. And fourth, only a few words about the Romanian delegation which is joining me. I have a Deputy Minister of Justice who will co-chair this afternoon the roundtable dedicated to the fight against corruption, a Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs who will bring input to the roundtable on humanitarian situation of refugees. And we also co-chair the Fight Against Corruption working group in order to transfer expertise in the field of justice and rule of law reform and support the adaptation of the legislation of the Republic of Moldova to EU acquis. One more word about the program that we are launching this year, a professional training program for judges and prosecutors held by the Romanian National Institute of the Magistracy, which is financed by the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Last but not least, let me inform you that, as I have announced during the conference, Romania will be happily co-host of the next ministerial conference of the Moldova Support Platform in Bucharest in the next couple of months. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister, please.
Excellencies, dear Annalena, dear Jarniv, dear Bogdan, first of all, let me express my gratitude, but also the gratitude of the Moldovan people for organizing the Moldova Support Platform Conference, co-hosted by Germany, France and Romania. We deeply appreciate this rapid response to our call for support. We have always felt the friendship and the support of European countries towards Moldova. European countries have been close to us during the pandemic. The European Union reacted very rapidly with substantial support when our country was hit by the economic crisis and the energy crisis. Both these crises have shown to the entire world, and especially to the citizens of Moldova, how important it is to build and consolidate the resilience of our country on multiple dimensions. You know, until the 24th of February, in my public statements, I used the expression Moldova is in the center of a perfect storm when I talked about three crises that Moldova was facing: the pandemic crisis, the energy crisis, end inflation or the price crisis. I couldn't even imagine that what would follow would be a new crisis which is more devastating and tragic for our region. After the 24th of February, the political and economic landscape in the entire world has changed. And especially for Moldova, this has dramatic consequences. This unjustifiable war on Ukraine has provoked in just 1 month losses of human lives, destructions without precedent in Ukraine, but also important social, economic and security consequences for our country. From the very beginning, the Republic of Moldova has condemned this unjustifiable war against Ukraine, which is a blatant violation of international law. We have shown through our support and co-sponsorship of the UN resolutions, but also in other international fora, the support for Ukraine's independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. But what is important is that with the few human and financial resources that Moldova has, we have done everything possible to show solidarity with the millions of people who are fleeing the war. Since the beginning of the war, 400,000 people have crossed Moldova's borders, and 100,000 people have decided to stay in Moldova. And almost half of them are children. These are vulnerable populations. At the same time, we can't forget about the well-being of our own citizens. The reforms that we have promised when we were invested, independently of the crises that we face, have to be implemented and show to the citizens of the Republic of Moldova that perhaps with a slight delay, but they will enjoy the changes and the development that they have voted for in the last presidential and parliamentary elections. We have requested to be part of the European Union family, and this is an expression of our firm attachment to the values and aspirations to be part of the free world. This is a very natural step for our country. We want to be part of the European Union because we believe in a development based on democratic institutions, good governance, justice reform and the rule of law. And we are ready to do our homework to achieve this type of development. We know that this is the only way in which we can keep our promises to our people and ensure a better standard of living, a better life for them in Moldova, at home. In the short term, faced with these crises, however, we need to make sure that we ensure the resilience of the country. And today, the citizens of Moldova can be proud. What we've heard in this conference is a profound appreciation for the efforts to support the refugees. What we've heard today is a willingness to help. We've heard about the willingness to receive refugees and ensure the green corridors, and we're very grateful for the efforts so far and for this doubling down on the number of people that could be received. We've also heard about support that could be scaled up. We are very grateful for the announcement of the budget support by the European Union, 53 million euros to help in this crisis, but also the grant support that has been announced by other countries, some of it directly to the Moldovan government, including through the donations account, some of it through international organizations, and some of it through international non-governmental organizations. We do have a vision and a plan to ensure the resilience of the country and to remain part of the free world. We have projects that are meant to increase the competitiveness of our companies in terms of their access to European markets. We're talking here about increasing productivity, digitalization, green transformation, quality infrastructure, and so on. We also have to act very fast, as was mentioned here, to increase energy security through more energy efficiency, diversification. We have been connected to the European transportation network, NSOE, but we do have to accelerate our projects and to connect with high voltage lines to Romania. These interconnection projects remain a priority for us despite these crises. We also take very seriously the prospect of building new production capacities and to really contribute to the green transformation of Europe through investing in renewables and alternative energy sources. Our agricultural producers also need assistance because they have lost markets. About 15% of Moldova's trade was with Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus before the war. And even last week, we've adopted a new package of measures to ensure the viability of agricultural companies and to ensure that the local market provision is not under risk. At the same time, we think that we can be a competitive provider of quality agricultural products, and we will work together with our partners to ensure facilitation of trade, to remove the export quotas, to ensure that together we have better logistics networks, better transportation corridors, and so on. At the same time, we understand that we stand at the border of Europe's security, and we are dealing with trans-border challenges, ensuring the public security within the country, and also working towards resilience in combating hybrid threats, such as improving cybersecurity and combating disinformation and fake news. We are also building social resilience. This is very important during these times. For many years, Moldova has been known as the poorest country in Europe, where the most vulnerable people were left behind. Now we are working on targeted mechanisms to really help those vulnerable, both refugees and Moldovan families. In this way, we want to develop in a convergence with the European Union countries, and all the efforts of the Moldovan government are directed towards this goal. I am certain that together, through this unity and solidarity that we have seen at the conference today, we will overcome. Thank you.
Vielen Dank. Wir haben Zeit für einige Fragen. Die erste kommt online von der Deutschen Welle von Herrn Schwarz.
And that was the joint press conference by the foreign ministers of Germany, France and Romania and the Prime Minister of Moldova with regard to how much money and other support the tiny country of Moldova that has just 2.5 million inhabitants can get from their big neighbours. With me in the studio now to talk about all this is Emmanuel Schaz, our political correspondent. So we're going to go through what everybody said, but what was your key takeaway from this press conference?
Well, I think it was definitely a show of unity, and just like Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said, this shows that there's a joint European vision in that situation. We've just heard the Prime Minister of Moldova describing the situation her country finds itself in. It's the center of a perfect storm. She said on top of the pandemic, energy and inflation crisis comes a dramatic war, an unjustifiable war. she said, with dramatic consequences. And we saw her colleagues talking about how they would react. It was definitely a show of unity. We heard French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian talking about the package of sanctions that is being discussed, and said that oil and coal needed absolutely to be part of that package. So that's already a big announcement. We've also heard the Foreign Minister of Romania, Bogdan Aurescu, talking about the crimes being committed. He said, I quote, "It is absolutely clear that Russia is responsible for those crimes." And he also said that all perpetrators must be brought to justice. They must face an international court. And finally, we heard very strong words from German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock. She said that this was a criminal war of aggression in our immediate neighborhood. She talked about a horrible reality, inhuman images, and she also said that this ought never be normalized ever. There was a very clear message from all four saying that no country should be subjected to the arbitrary will of others.
You mentioned Annalena Baerbock, who opened that press conference, and she ended her statement on a very strong note. She said, we are at the beginning of this crisis. So she's clearly seeing this as a longer period of instability, at least.
Exactly. Germany and its Western allies are bracing themselves for a very tumultuous times ahead. And it was in no uncertain words that German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said that European values needed to be asserted right now. Unity needed to be asserted against what she called an arbitrary war.
Also, Baerbock mentioned something that I think she had sort of covered the 5 areas that they were being discussing. The most important of which, I think, is, of course, the distribution of refugees. There were lots of problems with that back in 2015 when this big wave of refugees arrived in Europe from Syria. What did she say about that?
Well, that was very interesting, Gerhard, because before, the European Union could never manage to agree on a mechanism of redistribution of refugees reaching Europe. And all of a sudden, with this particular crisis and this dramatic situation happening on European soil, well, it seems that it has unblocked something at the European level. It's very important because the European Union and its allies are now willing to activate this mechanism of redistribution of refugees proportionally to what each country can do. So this is a significant step forward for the European Union, for the European continent.
Speaking of the European continent, the European Union, what stood out for me as well is that both Mr. Aurescu, the Foreign Minister of Romania, and of course Prime Minister Gavrili sort of reiterated the wish of Moldova to join the EU. Is that going to be easy? Because you have to bring something to the table as well to join this club, don't you?
Well, you do, but I think Moldova, and it has been also lauded by Annalena Baerbock, Moldova has provided a lot of efforts, and it also said, reiterated its firm attachment to the European Union, in the words of Natalia Gavrilita, to be part of what she called the free world, just to, those are the words of US President Joe Biden. She also said that Moldova believed in the development based on democratic institutions, on the rule of law, and she stated once again that Moldova was ready to do its homework. And if we look at Moldova, where it is placed on a map, of course it is next to a war-torn country that is today's Ukraine, but it's also a door to Europe, as it is a neighbor of Romania. So it has a very strategic position which has to be considered by the European Union. It is making every effort it can to join the EU.
And also being sandwiched between Romania and Ukraine, some said, and we've discussed this earlier with our correspondent Christine Mundwa, who is actually in Moldova at the moment, and I asked her whether Moldovans would be worried about being so close to that fighting, and should Russia be able to annex the whole of Ukraine, they might be next on Putin's target list. Do you think that since it is not a member of the EU, Moldova is not a member of NATO, can it rely, you think, on the help of either of them?
I think Moldova has every right to be worried given its geographic situation and its economic situation. Prime Minister Natalia Gavrilita was reminding that there's 100,000 refugees and proportionally to the population of Moldova, this is a huge number, and it's one of the poorest countries of the European continent. So Moldova has every right to be worried about, future invasions. We're not that far yet, but it has every right to require further help, help which it has become today in the form of, between other things, donations amounting to 695 million euros. This is to deal with the influx of refugees from Ukraine, but also to deal with their own development and to strengthen the rule of law in Moldova, and also it is also to deal with its energy situation. It is as of now heavily reliant of Russian gas supplies, and Western allies are aiming at helping Moldova to become independent from this Russian gas.
We did speak about refugees. You just mentioned them. Of course, one of the biggest problems that Moldova is currently facing. Just to round this off, you've been to the Ukrainian-Polish border with refugees. You've seen many of them arriving, many of them children. What do you think, very briefly, about that situation in Moldova right now?
Well, I think they will have to have support to school children who are here. Half of the refugees in Moldova are children. They need financial support for that. And this is, we're not going to get out of that situation anytime soon. So projects need to be thought of in the long run.
Emmanuel Schas, DW political correspondent, thank you very much. And that's it from me and Emmanuel for now. Of course, I'll have an update for you at the top of the hour. And in the meantime, remember, you can always get all the latest news on our website. That's dw.com. Gerhard Alfers in Berlin from me, Emmanuel, and the team. Thanks for watching.